There we go. Hello, and welcome to Sharon's Book RX, also known as Sharon's Book Prescription. This is a show where we talk about children's books and young adult literature. And this week, we are so lucky to welcome author and illustrator and publisher of many award-winning books, Kathryn Otoshi. Welcome, Kathryn. Thank you for being here for the first show.
So great to see you, as always.
Thanks
for having me.
Thank you for being here. And Kathryn, your books seem to center on emotional intelligence without being preachy or pedantic. So how do you choose your subjects?
You know, when I choose my subject matter, it's sort of like casting a character in a scene. So I'm always thinking, is it a robot? Is it a talking animal? What is it exactly? In the case of one, for example, all the colors in the beginning actually did have faces. And instead of using human skin tones, brown skin tones or pink skin tones or whatever, I thought, what if I use green, purple, and orange skin tones to talk about differences and how we're different? So I kind of cast my character for that particular narrative. And then I hone in my illustration style to match the style of the writing and the concept.
So one is universal because it doesn't match any one ethnicity, any of the genders. So it works for everyone. What inspired it? Because this book truly blew up when it came out on the market.
You know, it really had to do with differences and trying to find an interesting way to focus in on it without being and keeping it more symbolic. And you wouldn't think that kids necessarily would understand symbology, but they do. They understood right away that the circles or the blobs of colors represented different personalities and different emotions. And when you think about it, these so-called characters are introduced very early in, kinder or pre-K, when we're learning how to count and when we're learning about colors. So they were already familiar with it and understood the idea of why I did it, but also the concept of differences comes very early. We're constantly, as human beings, comparing ourselves to others. And I just wanted to have a story that was about being accepting of others' differences and also celebrating each other's differences.
Exactly. Thank you. And then let's go up to the book right over your shoulder, Draw the Line, also over my shoulder.
Yeah.
That came out in 2017. What inspired Draw the Line?
You know, it originally started because of my own my own personal issues of feeling like, I was having trouble saying no. I wasn't really kind of drawing my own boundaries. And I realized that it was, I wanted to do a story about boundaries. And then current events sort of came into play, and I was having some, issues with somebody, I'm close to this day, my dad, but we were really on so-called, literally you'll see in this book, opposite sides of the page, and the kids are coming from opposite sides of the page. And we literally had a very strong difference of opinion. And so current events did come into play because this book ended up being about how we can kind of come together when we have these differences of opinions, and it's strong and it feels like we're separating.
Got it. Can you show us a little bit more inside the book of how the children are separate and then come together?
Okay, sure. Yeah. So what happens is the two boys are kind of excited about, even though they kind of bump into each other, they ask themselves, hey, you're kind of cool, can we be friends? Can we connect? And they draw the line so that they connect, and it's kind of chemistry. They're able to lift the line, but also a little bit magic because it's a book. And what happens, and here's sort of what I was talking about, a misstep happens where one kid takes too much line, and you can kind of guess what happens, but the other kid takes a spill. It was not on purpose, but misunderstandings ensues.
The palette changes.
Yes. What happens is the line, which symbolizes a connection, starts to rip and break, and then become even a bigger thing. The tear becomes kind of a crack, and the crack becomes a precipice, and it gets so big that they're soon on opposite sides of the page. So what happens is, you can kind of see it here. One of the kids reflects about how we can kind of come together when we have such a huge difference. And he examines that point of connection, and we realize, he realizes, hey, can that line be negotiated? Can we make something of it, possibly a bridge, instead of, can we build something beyond what we originally thought it was going to be? So it's really, the story is about not necessarily always looking at the farthest points of contention, but the idea is where our edges can come together. That's where we can start to build.
That is gorgeous. Thank you. And if you would, just from a technical point of view, open up again for those who are not as well versed in the industry, the middle of the pages is called the gutter, correct?
The gutter. Yeah, that's right.
And that use of the gutter, if you would go to where it starts to divide, is so incredible. That is amazing.
You know, and Sharon, it's so funny. I had this in a, as a PDF. And when I kind of flipped through it really quick, it was like this little animation that happened. So what was interesting for me is the line is the one that evolves the most, right? Our connection with each other. So it starts off as, 1D, then 2D, then 3D, and becomes a crack and a precipice, and eventually a path where, the happy news is they do find a way to travel on this road together. They ask themselves that question, and then in the end,
that is so wonderful.
Decide to.
And it's wordless, which means it can work in all cultures,
yes,
all literacy levels, right?
Yes.
It's wonderful. So thank you. I do love that book. Some stories enter into your life and you weren't expecting them. So that would be what happened with Beautiful Hands. Can you let us know what the story was to that?
Yeah, just I have it here. This was done for a friend of mine. He did find out that he was very, very ill with pancreatic cancer, stage 4. And one of the things that he always wanted to do was a children's picture book. And so I was really excited. And I said, you know what? Let's do this thing. Let's go ahead and make a book for your kids. And so it started very small. But because I wanted Noah and Sophie, his children, involved, and Deborah, his wonderful wife, involved, it started off with his question, what will your beautiful hands do today? So it was all Brett coming, doing this thing, holding his kids' hands and asking that question. And from there, I was like, wow, what if we did handprints with his family? And it ended up just becoming what I consider a community building project, where more and more people joined in to put in their hands. And for me, symbolically, all the hands in this book represents our kind of commitment to doing kind, actionable things that we can do for each other in the community.
That is, would you hold that all the way up for just a moment? That is, and those are all handprints.
Those are all handprints. Over 100 handprints are in this book. And and afterwards, and I feel like Brett taught me this, but because he was so big on taking action, and I wanted to find a way to express that, I ended up doing spirit birds with kids all over the country, where we would actually kind of make a commitment and hold up our hands and say, I promise to do something kind, for somebody else every day. And then we would take the hand, the promise would be written with their signature, and we would make rainbows, trees, or these spirit birds that could be hung in schools.
That is gorgeous. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
And you had another book come into your life, and we are going to welcome your friend right now.
Yay.
So let me let Jim in. Hello, Jim. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you guys hear me?
Thank you for waiting. I'm going to introduce you, but I want to ask, the pronunciation of your last name is Perez or Perez?
Either or, Perez.
Perez. Okay, so this is Jim Perez, And he is the inspiration for Lunch Every Day. And I'm so excited you could join us. This is so cool because this book is amazing. And when Kathryn said, can Jim come along for the interview? It's like, are you kidding me?
I know, that's what your response was. You're like, the Jim Perez?
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, so this is so exciting. So you two are friends. How did this book come about?
Yeah, so I actually was fortunate to attend a national bullying conference in San Diego where I
I'm
met
gonna stop
Kathryn.
you. Go back. What is a national bullying conference? It doesn't sound good, Jim.
well, the reality is actually a conference that brought educators, school administrators, psychologists, therapists, and it really was looking at bringing in experts around the world that would actually come in and talk about some evidence research-based programming, some new literature, some new books, various keynote speakers that really would help schools help with bullying issues on their campus. So it was an unbelievable, very resource-filled conference. And Kathryn, with her unbelievable experience and the books that she's written specifically that are school-aged, was presenting. And she was presenting on her book One. And I'll be honest with you, I was hypnotized by her book, how in such a simple way of discussing colors to really start taking the light of what's happening in our classrooms, what's happening in our school campuses, and really kind of also then not only understanding it, but then talking about this emotional intelligence of support, of caring, of coming together, and just I was blown away. And I almost felt like a stalker because afterwards she was signing books for everybody, and I was like on my corner waiting and waiting. And she kind of looked at, I don't think she realized, but she looked at me a couple of times like, are you buying a book? Do you want to talk to me? Like, what's going on here? And then finally, when everybody was done, because I wanted one-on-one time with her, and I just said, hey, Kathryn, my name is Jim Perez. I work here locally in Southern California. I would love to meet, sit down, have lunch with you and talk about this partnership. I just had received some funding from the California, in Orange County specifically, some Prop 63 mental health dollars to address bullying countywide. And I just said, I need you, Kathryn. We really need to work together. So that's how we met.
That is amazing. And what is your job down in Southern California?
My job at that time actually was the administrator overseeing all of youth violence prevention programs from mental health, gangs, bullying, safe from the start, alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs, to name a few.
That's wonderful. Thank you for doing that work. So let's look at the book first. We're going to talk about it a little bit more. Kathryn, are you open to reading it, or Jim, would you like to read it, or would you like to go back and forth?
I'll let Kathryn kind of, take that step and move it forward.
Okay. Yeah. So this book, kind of Jim talked about how we met. And so we definitely became friends over the course of, it was several years. I feel like that we were working together, and I am a true fan of Jim. He's just one of the most, I don't mean to embarrass you, but just really, truly one of the most remarkable human beings I've ever met. And I actually say that in the book, and I mean it. Like, okay, well, and so one day we were sitting down for lunch, and I was singing Jim's praises, and he's such a humble guy, but he kind of looked at me and he started telling me kind of what's in this story I'm going to share with you. So the story is called Lunch Every Day. And what was happening, and Jim, feel free to, go ahead and say whatever you want to add, or also say, if I, don't say anything right. But
one thing before you start, Kathryn, is me and Kathryn were back at the National Bullying Conference, but this time we were in Tennessee. And this was about 4 years later.
Yeah.
from when we met in San Diego.
Mhm.
Wow.
And I walked out of a session and Kathryn was with her booth, and Kathryn was like, "Did you like the speaker?" And I said, "No, actually I did not like the speaker." And Kathryn goes, "Why not?" And I said, "You know, people keep talking about bullies, but no one ever actually has a true bully that's an expert in bullying talking about his experience." And Kathryn's like, "Well, what do you mean?" And that's when I shared my story to Kathryn. I said, "You know what, Kathryn, I actually was a bully." And Kathryn's like, "No way." You know,
I was like, oh my God, I almost dropped my fork.
and then Kathryn said, like, "Tell me, like, what happened?" And so I told Kathryn my story. And then, as you're gonna hear in a little bit of my story of growing up, and then kind of the work that I do now and the work that me and Kathryn do, it's just like a full circle. So I just wanted to start with that. And
I'm
then
so
Kathryn.
glad. Thank you, Jim.
Perfect.
No, that was perfect. So yeah, it starts off with, and I should mention what the situation was, is what Jim told me was that he would take this kid's lunch at school. And that's why I was kind of surprised. And I was like, really? I'm like, well, what happened and what changed you into the person you are today? So it says, there he is. Just look at him. Internal thoughts, skinny kid, slumping. Is there a face behind all that hair? I could topple him with a tap. And says, no way am I standing in that line. And Jim, I don't know if you feel comfortable saying this, but later you said, I wasn't just taking him. There was taking the lunch. There was a reason.
Yeah, unfortunately, back, when I was growing up, free and reduced lunch, they would actually make you wait till everybody else ate first. And then you kind of caught the leftovers. You kind of caught the cold pizza, the cold crusted. So it's like, and then I was always embarrassed because they gave us like this big sticker, it's like everyone knew like, oh, he's poor. And I happened to go to somewhat of an affluent school growing up. So I already felt left out. I already felt like I didn't belong. Very, very small number of people of color at the school. So I was like, I'm not standing in that line. I'm not going to embarrass myself anymore. So that's kind of where that picture was like, I'm not standing in that line.
Yeah.
Yeah. And says, at least his lunch is good. Better than mine. Bet his home is better than mine too. Older brothers, So the next day at school, I shove him extra hard just because I can. Someone sees me do it, tattletale. I end up in the office. The principal tells me to try my potential, blah, blah, blah. I look down like I feel bad. Mostly, I just feel mad. So things stay the same for a while. See all those lunches kind of representing calendar years until, hey, did you get one? Oh, the whole class did. Are you going to go? Huh, skinny kid's having a party. Everyone's invited, even me. So of course, everybody's still excited. And Jim, I don't know if you said this, but in my head, it was like, whatever, I'm so not going. So you can see that crumpled sheet. However, the morning of, I look at my window and I let the sun warm me up for a while. And I put on my best shirt and go. When I get there, everyone's holding a gift. I put my hands in my pockets. And Jim, I can't quite remember, but I think you said, it was a whole different neighborhood and it was kind of a big deal.
Yeah, I was actually, I remember driving in my bike, and it was part of a neighborhood that I've never really went to. And it was intimidating to me. It was 2-story homes, nice stucco homes. It's like, I literally fell out of class, even just in my bike. And then even as I'm pulling up, as just, it was one of those where it actually has a huge door, but only a small opens. But I'm like, oh my God, how do you open that door? Like, it doesn't even look normal,
Yeah. Yeah. And, when I was doing the writing too, what I did was I really separated the text, even though it's one sentence basically, to really get the impact of Jim making this courageous step to go into this this new neighborhood. So I see Skinny Kid's mom inside holding his birthday cake. Everyone is celebrating in the kitchen. I stay in the living room. I slumped down in a chair, kicking air. And I think it was at this point where you said, Jim, that you were thinking about leaving. Like,
yeah, I fell out of place. I was like, like, what do I do? I don't know if I belong here. Like, yeah, I got an invitation, but like, I did not feel comfortable.
Yeah, and I hear a sound and look up. His mom is in the doorway, like she knows I'm there. She sees me like sees me. She marches right up to me. She says in a real quiet voice, and I do recall, Jim, you were saying that you're like, oh my God, she's gonna yell at me in front of everyone.
Yeah, I kind of walked up to get some punch as she was kind of coming, and it was kind of like surreal. A lot of times I remember growing up and like you see those movies and we're like Jesus, or when like the light comes, and it's just like, it was weird because I look up and I like see this light, and then like she's coming walking towards me, and I'm like, oh no.
I didn't know that part. So here it is. She says to Jim in a real quiet voice, Jimmy, what would you like for lunch tomorrow? And I kind of write over here, nothing, I don't want anything. And she says, I hear you like my lunches. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make you a second lunch, and my son will bring it for you every day. Okay? And do you know something? She did. And that's how I got lunch every day, and a whole lot more. So for me, I feel like there's kind of three heroes in the story. The book is dedicated to Jim. There would be no story without Jim's experience and his willing to be vulnerable and to share with us. But he also, look at what Jim has been in the education field for over like 25 years. He's done countless anti-bullying programs, kindness programs, gang intervention, community building projects. And I mean, honestly, Jim, tell me if I'm wrong, but we're talking about thousands, hundreds of thousands of kids, probably 500,000 kids at least, that you've had this huge impact on, for you sharing yourself. And I just will say too, the woman is the other person who I feel like gave of herself and went beyond. An actionable thing every day. It wasn't just like one time. It was Jim knew she was thinking about him every day. And also the kid, I mean, I don't know if you're willing to talk about it, Jim, but I mean, he must have seen something. Can look like a really tough guy, but beyond that, you have a heart of gold, honestly. And he must have seen that somehow,
Even when you read it, I still get teary-eyed. Brings me back to that moment.
Yeah.
I was surprised how even when I was bullying him or being mean to him, he always wanted to be around me. And it was hard because I'm like, what are you doing? Like, I'm being mean to you, you know? And it was like, you know, he just still wanted to kind of be part of me. You know, and I remember, you know, when he would bring that second lunch to me, you know, one thing I had told Kathryn, I remember when we went back to school, I kind of told everyone like, hey, you know, no one can mess with, like, you know, this
That's
kid
right.
became
You told me
untouchable.
that.
This kid became, you know, in a sense, like, you
Yeah.
know, very protective. But that kinship, that love, you know, and I wish I could tell you that my life changed instantly. And it wasn't like an instant change, but it was
No.
like, it was almost like an angel touched me, you know. I never felt that love.
Absolutely. I remember you're kind of saying, you know, I said, did you keep, you know, did things change afterwards? And like you said, you're like, no, it was instant. The next day, it was like, you became almost like a protector of that kid. And I love that. But, you know, there's so much about us as human beings. We're complex, right? And we have that ability if we're able to let that part of us shine. And sometimes we're
Absolutely.
always kept in the dark. We're always kept back. We're always kept from not reaching our full potential. And for me, I can totally see why he wanted to hang out with you, Jim. You're so charismatic and you're so fun to hang out with. I get it. I always have such delight whenever I see Jim anywhere. So I get it.
Yeah, you know, as I like kind of circle back and think about it, it's kind of like a seed was planted
Yeah.
that was just, I mean, an unbelievable gift, an unbelievable act of kindness, you know. And just throughout the years, it's like as others kind of came into your life and you're getting different water and nourishment, you know, and it's just kind of like, you know, that rebirth of like, oh my goodness, like I was reborn that day, you know, from this gift that this lady gave, you know. And she could have been mean. She could have said like, you know what, don't touch my son, you know. And it's like, it kind of goes back to those stereotypes and going back to like, you know, because if that would have happened, it would have just given me more sense of like, look, this world doesn't like me, I don't belong, you know. Where it was the opposite, you know, it was like, no, you know what, not only do you belong, I'm here for you, we're here for you, you know, you're loved, you're cared for. So just amazing, you know. I I mean, now it's like she completely changed my life and I didn't even know it at that moment. And then the other thing was, is kind of Kathryn talked about, that's that fuel of fire of me helping others. That's that fuel that's like, you know what, I need to be there for everybody. I need to be there for everyone else, you know. I do a lot of work with incarcerated youth, you know, some that have committed some really, you know, serious crimes. And it's like, you know, I try to provide them hope and like, you know what, like, okay, mijo, like this is a new day. Like, let's look at what we can move forward at. So.
Right, exactly. And in the book, there's the part where you say, she sees me. And at first that can sound negative, right? She sees me as a troublemaker, but really she sees Jim, right? She sees Jim, the whole person. And it's that moment of being seen. And I think Jim locked up, but that's such a pivotal moment. And Jim, I think you are frozen. Oh, there you
Oh, there we go.
There we go. And so it sounds like that's what you are also doing for the youth you work with, is you see them.
Yeah.
And that's huge.
He does.
Sharon, you know, it's kind of one of those things like when you went through that experience, you know what it feels like. You know, a lot of times people say like, you don't understand me, you don't walk in my shoes. You know, you hear that from a lot of individuals, and you're absolutely right. Like, she saw me, and that experience was like, oh my goodness, I see in a different completely light others as well as she saw onto me.
Right, that was huge. So there are more questions I wanted to ask, but of course, one of the biggies right now is, are you still in touch with Jeff and his mother?
You know, sadly, I would tell you no. I will tell you, it's interesting as we kind of wrote this book. I follow him. I know where he is. He lives out of state. We've had a little bit of conversation, but I haven't circled back and reshared this. I don't even think he realized he wasn't there, like when he didn't hear what his mom said to me, but I'm sure his mom constantly had, like he's probably like, why am I bringing a second lunch? And his mom might have told him like, oh wait, I told him like if he needs anything. So I haven't reached back out to him. That was the only time that I saw his mom in my whole life.
No way.
The only time.
Wow.
And it just kind of goes back to, and one of the things I always tell the students that I work with is, you never know if someone can impact your life. And this person literally was, 45, an hour and a half time that I was with, and even in that time of me being there, I really shared less than 2 minutes with this person. And the impact, unbelievable.
It really is. Oh, that is absolutely incredible. And it is, sorry, I'm also just verklempt, as they would say on Saturday Night Live. So this was, I didn't realize, such a short moment in your life. And again, the daily lunches, and it was a turning point for you. It was pivotal. So we saw what happened. It was incredible. And I think that people reading this book will be inspired to help others. And you're showing us it could just be a minute. It could be that seeing of that human being. But not everyone is going to be as aware as that mother, or honestly, as kind. So what suggestions do you have? Because people do want to make a difference. And sometimes they think it's too much work, or I have to make too big of a commitment. What wisdom can you share with us?
Yeah, it's the little things. I was at the grocery store yesterday, and there was a lady that was, in a little cart that was driving and dropped her ice cream, and then I go, ma'am, stop, I got it. And she just looked at me like, you're helping me? And I picked it up and I gave it to her, and this is where I went above and beyond. I go, how's your day? And she just kind of looked at me and she like, you're asking me how my day is, and she's like, oh, well, I've had a lot of medical conditions. Well, what's going on? Then she told us, I had a heart attack 2 years ago. I'm like, oh man, I'm so sorry to hear about that. Well, you know what? You're here today. I'm glad, you're breathing, you're here today, and then, she's had a water and started talking about, well, I was from the East Coast and, we got water, strictly from the hole. I'm like, oh, right, well, awesome. That's good. We started having this conversation, and she just turned around on the way out and she's like, thank you. No one talks to me.
Oh,
and it was just like, and those are the moments, Sharon, that I don't think people realize. It's not about like going out and searching. It's in your everyday life. Do we acknowledge? Do we have kinship? Do we have love? Now if there is a bully on your campus, it's like, can someone reach out and provide support? What are the root causes? Why is this kid acting out? Kathryn talked about, I had 5 brothers, and the way I was getting love was getting beat up every day and being yelled at. My environment thought that that's what love was, and so then again, as a young man growing up, not understanding like, no, love is compassion, kinship, it's looking out for you, it's helping you when you're in need, so it's a little bit of everything, but I think it starts just with the simple thing. And I love how Kathryn said lunch every day. You know what? Have lunch with someone that's just sitting by themselves. And I tell my son this, he's, in 7th grade now, and I tell him, mijo, like, I want you to go eat lunch with someone that's sitting by themselves.
Does he do it?
He goes, Dad, I'll try, but one thing that we do, and this is a good one, Sharon. One thing that we do for every birthday, I have them invite someone that probably has never been invited to a birthday, or someone that I want you to invite someone that would least likely expect you to invite them to your birthday.
That is wonderful.
It is wonderful. I didn't know that.
And those are the little things, and then it's like I go above and beyond to welcome this child and their family, so, and again, like you said, what are things? It's the little things, Sharon.
Yeah. And it is, every time you're talking about it, you are seeing people, you are seeing the whole person, and you're valuing that person. And that's immeasurable, right? And people need that. you two are amazeballs. I do want to ask if you have anything else to add, but before I forget, with every video that I do, there will be a chosen nonprofit, and sales of the books, and I'll talk about that in a minute, a percentage of that will go to a nonprofit. And the one we've chosen this time is Feeding America, which is the largest hunger relief program in the United States. So a percentage of the book sales will go to that. There will always be a minimum donation of $100, regardless of what the book sales are. So making that difference where we can, since you have donated your time today, we want to make sure that that is we're passing it on with a ripple effect.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Really so important in our communities, make sure that people are fed. And it goes kind of with the book. I mean, I was not being fed. Nobody, unfortunately in my home environment, there wasn't a lot of food in the home. So that lunch, was key and critical for me, and just so important. And that was the other thing. I was hungry, I wanted, and I didn't want to be embarrassed, to have food by showing this sticker, having to wait all the way to the end of the line just to be able to eat.
And emotionally hungry too.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, good point. And the free lunch program sounds, I mean, kids need food, we need to feed kids, but to shame them, to first of all, give them scraps, so you're telling them they're not as worthwhile, and then to not have a way to make it subtle. There's a book by Rex Ogle called Free Lunch. Yeah, it's a memoir, and it's about how embarrassing and hard it is to get in that line. And we need to make it better for kids and not shaming, and just feed them all. It should just be free food, and the kids who can afford, the parents should send money to school. Anyway, so is there anything you two would like to add before I do the housekeeping at the end?
Just thanks for the opportunity for me. Just to say, I completely wholeheartedly agree with what Jim was saying. With kindness, we get overwhelmed with big changes, but we have to realize that even sharing a story, like what you do, Sharon, reading books about certain subject matters to open kids' minds, getting it into the right hands of, for example, like Jim, the fact that when he reads something, it can go into programs, or just have books are like worlds, right? And we enter into it, and it gives us an opportunity to see new perspectives, understand different cultures, really explore, and also, as you were saying earlier, understand through, for that moment, through the book, walking in that person's shoes for that period of time is huge, with a game changer of how we think and how we can potentially treat others, versus just staying in our own myopic world and thinking this is it. So
and all your books do that. Thank you. Thank you so much.
And Sharon, I just wanted to say thank you for your time and energy. For me, I just want to end with everyone matters. Everyone matters. And if we can live in a society where, we see each other, we hear each other, we support each other, we're going to live in this beautiful world. So I just, challenge you, pick up, go eat lunch with someone that you haven't eaten lunch with, go meet somebody, get connected with each other, see each other, feel each other, be supportive of each other. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. And thank you so much for all that you do, both of you. And Jim, if you have any websites you'd like me to link on the channel, please let me know. Now it's the housekeeping of me pointing down and saying subscribe here. I have no idea where the button's going to be. And shout outs to Sierra, who I call the woman who keeps me organized, who is 13 years old and the best admin on the planet. Joe Schutz, who is our video and sound editor. Thank you so much, Joe. And Sasha Levin Gurajar, also my youngest daughter, who is the social media outreach. And there will be links at the bottom too to purchase Kathryn's books through Books Inc. A percentage of those sales, again, will go to Feeding America. Thank you both for my inaugural thing. You made me cry. I didn't expect that. Yes, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.